Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. Now, this piece is directed especially toward those who are always raging mindlessly about the free market. The Saudi oil minister says that global oil production could plunge 30% in the next decade if investors don't put up more money. Of course, the oil industry is the fourth most profitable industry in the world in 2021. Now, what I have to say is that any business model which has existed for decades and needs more outside investment is a failed business model. But I'll come back to that point. The fact is that of the five most profitable industries globally in 2021, three are heavily subsidized by the U.S. government. Software and the pharmaceutical industries actually exceed the fossil fuel industry for subsidies, at least for 2021, as far as openly stated subsidies. Now, all five of the most profitable industries have stated they intend to increase prices in early 2022. The arms industry in the U.S. exists almost exclusively on government funding. Even foreign weapons sales are negotiated and subsidized by federal government marketing, threats, and further economic subsidies. When the U.S. gives money to countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel, those countries use that money to buy weapons from U.S. corporations, which means the weapons sold to other countries are paid for in part or in full by U.S. citizens. By comparison, the arms industries in some countries, like Russia and China, are mostly nationalized. Yes, they sell weapons to other countries. However, the profits from their arms sales goes back to their own citizens. The profits from U.S. arms sales goes exclusively to corporate investors. All right, when the money from countries like Russia and China, they make a profit, and it goes into social programs such as universal health care, but not here. In the U.S., the health insurance industry is more heavily subsidized than is popularly portrayed. Of course, we all know about the American Care Act, ACA, Obamacare, which is one of the largest corporate welfare programs in world history. However, part of Medicare and Medicaid were privatized under George W. Bush, leaving recipients needing to buy supplemental private corporate insurance. Most of the recipients of Medicare and Medicaid are on Social Security or SSI, so they have fixed incomes from the federal government, part of which they must spend to pay for the private insurance supplements. This equates to additional, though indirect, insurance industry subsidies. Construction companies that build infrastructure in the U.S., such as roads and bridges, sell stock in their companies. This means they must declare profits and pay stock dividends to their shareholders, because all of their profits come from government funding, that means that the dividends paid to shareholders come from one of two places, either from taxpayers or from the creation of further public debt for which taxpayers are on the hook to pay with interest. The creation of greater public debt in and of itself is representative of loans in the form of bonds sold to public and corporate investors, generally the banking system. Those loans come with interest which must be paid. Most often, these debts are purchased by the Federal Reserve, which is a consortium of corporate banks with the power to create more currency out of thin air. Thus, the Fed creates currency to buy federal debt and then charges interest to the government for doing so. The creation of additional currency weakens the dollar and drives up inflation. In that process, taxpayers, who are also consumers, pay more in taxes to pay off the debts and interest, and then pay more in the form of higher prices on consumer goods. The majority of federal debt is then paid to military contractors, to other countries, to buy weapons from the same military contractors, to health insurance companies, directly or indirectly as noted above, or paid as subsidies to fossil fuel software and pharmaceutical corporations, who then use the profits to pay dividends to shareholders. To clarify, 85% of stocks are held by less than 10% of the U.S. population. At least 60% of stocks are held by 0.1% of the population. Now let me get back to the point that I was making here. A successful business model would be one in which a company may start off with some level of debt. However, as the business becomes profitable, the business pays off the original debt. From there, that business would expand using the profits from the initial business. Right now, we see a long string of failed business models, which were once seen as being successful. Corporate chains with thousands of locations are now having to close locations. The reason for this is that instead of using their own profits to expand operations, they instead take on exorbitant levels of debt. Why? Because the profits are not coming in fast enough. They cannot accept a certain level of success. They want more. Their shareholders want more. Any business which has the incessant need for more external investment rather than using native profit for expansion is a failed business model. Any business which needs government subsidies to continue operations is a failed model. Any government which requires the creation of more debt sold to the very entities to which it pays subsidies and bailouts while reducing social services to its own people is a failed governmental model and hence a failed state. Such failed models have a limited chance of survival. We can use the example of the closure of thousands of retail locations, plaguing this country to predict the future of such a model being used for governance of the nation. Excuse me. Threats, sanctions, and military expansionism have absolutely no chance of saving such a failed model or government. This has been tried by every failed empire of the past and has always failed. While the actual collapse of each empire may have happened relatively rapidly on the surface, the exact same sequence of increased debt has precluded that collapse and was always warned of by voices seen as subversive and unpatriotic, even treasonous, prior to the collapse. Those voices were honest and accurate. Right now, our government and numerous industries have a lot of historical events to reference which illustrate the coming catastrophic failures which will not only take the U.S., but the entire planet by storm. While the numbers may be arbitrary, there is an absolute limit to how much debt any business or government model can accrue before a collapse occurs. Creditors will demand to be paid. They become more insistent on payment when they see a collapse is imminent. The oil industry can see their collapse coming with the move toward renewable energy. The U.S. government, while far more silent on the subject, can see the collapse of the empire coming as more and more investors move away from the dollar and away from the petrodollar. In both cases, investors are moving slowly away from these models. The sole concern of the elites is to make sure the elites themselves remain elite after the collapse. Those not in the elite have seen all our lives that they have absolutely no concern for the fate of anyone beyond themselves under normal circumstances. How much less will they care when the collapse occurs? We have tens of thousands of Americans dying every year for lack of medical care. We're bombing other countries that are of no threat to us. We have Americans, we have children that are going to bed hungry. We have a collapsing education system. We have a growing number of homeless. And that number is expected to just explode within the next few months, if not weeks. This is a failed state. We cannot deny it. I don't care how much you want to rage on about the free market. This is the free market. This collapse that is happening as we speak is the free market. This is capitalism in action. All right, share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can, please donate $1 a month to help expand the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.